Obligatory Happy New Year, said UD like the grouchy old miser that he is. It's not really fair to keep comparing Super Metroid to Fusion, is it? Because there's some surface level similarities, and indeed they're games of the same series, but beyond that, beyond them both being action platformers, there's really not a whole lot that's the same about their genre. This was meant to be an open-ended sandbox, go wherever you're able, sequenced action-adventure game, and that was a more linear action platformer. But this perhaps, like, what we saw with Ridley is an interesting case study, I think, of the exact thing I've said over and over again about linear games not necessarily being bad. Because to have a linear game means that you have a great deal more control over the interactivity that the player is going to have with the mechanics of the game. Because I was allowed to enter Ridley's fight hilariously underpowered, and as we saw, and as I experimented quite painfully, there's basically no reasonable way to win that fight without either having a fuck ton of super missiles or the plasma beam. There just isn't. That doesn't mean it's impossible. Just like I did with 32 attempts and a box of shurikens, I could have, with, a giant fish in La Mulana, I could have done the same here. And people quite reasonably pointed out, oh, you did. Watching your failed attempts mean I saw some flaws in your movement strategy. You were actually bouncing off the walls and losing somersault when you didn't need to. Yeah, okay. But, and some of that was indeed unintentional. Some of that was indeed me just screwing up. But bear in mind that you can't shoot while somersaulting in the screw attack mode. And not only can you not shoot, but just as importantly, you can't charge, which means you can start a charge while you're standing. Here, watch this. In fact, the sprite is even deceptive. Watch how this works. Like, you can start a charge while you're standing, and you can continue to hold the charge, but if you let it go right as you come out of a somersault, the shot will still be a normal shot, even though the charge graphic on your sprite looks like it's fully powered up. Which means I ended up losing a lot of offensive opportunities against Ridley. See, that was not a charged shot there. I'll see if I can do it one more time. So see? I'm continuing to hold the charge button while I somersault, and then let it go, and that's just a normal charge. So you can't progress a charge while you're somersaulting. You have to charge it fully while not somersaulting. So not only can you not offend, not only can you not attack, but you can't even prepare an attack while somersaulting. So there were many times that I purposefully lost my somersault, specifically so that I could have an offensive opportunity against Ridley, and it was hard as balls. And with the difficulty curve that Nintendo has prescribed elsewhere in this game, I really don't think that they balanced that fight with anything other than the idea of going at it with a fuck ton of super missiles or the plasma beam. But the game quite obviously allows you to go in there without a fuck ton of missiles or the plasma beam. You can do it. It's easy to skip the power beam, or plasma beam. It's very easy to skip the plasma beam. It's effortless. The game is intending you to explore before you go into that fight, just like Link to the Past. It is entirely balancing the game on the assumption that you will have gotten all the things and all the stuff. So, this brings me back to the linearity of Fusion. The linearity of Fusion means that game, the combat design, especially of the boss fights of that game, is really, really tightly controlled, and it comes out to nice effect. It comes out to you becoming more potent, but your enemies also becoming more potent, so that the challenge is not lost, but it's also not made knuckle-bustingly frustrating. You can much more tightly control the narrative of the interactivity, and you're not left with the open-endedness that is unavoidable in a sandbox game like this. In a, sequenced action-adventure, go-wherever-you're-able style of sandbox game. So, I don't know what the solution to this is. The solution for a game with the difficulty balancing somewhere on the level of, say, La Mulana, like a Dojin indie game, which is not concerned with appealing to the masses, but rather concerned with maintaining a certain form of artistic integrity, which is fine. I mean, that's what indie games are for, right? They're not there to make unlimited, huge, awful amounts of money. They're there to be art. But the balance for that style of a game, for a style of game like La Mulana, is to err on the side of difficulty. You have a bare minimum amount of equipment that you are required to get into to sequence to a boss, and beyond that, that bare minimum is your... what's the best way to put it? That bare minimum is your maximum difficulty level. You can just barely access the boss with this much equipment, and that's as hard as it's going to get, and from there it just gets easier and easier the more gear you go into it with. You know, you can go at it with just shurikens, or you can go get the axe and actually make the boss fight halfway doable. Now, the same was obviously true here in Super Metroid. You could get into it with basically nothing but super missiles and the gravity, like 5 super missiles in the gravity suit, and away you go. Or you can go get the plasma beam and make the fight actually doable. I don't know that there's a mathematical solution to this. And if there is a mathematical solution to the difficulty balancing, it would almost certainly involve a more, like a smoother parabola. Like a smoother gradient, a more graceful curve between the knuckle-bustingly frustrating of, I've just barely earned access. Oh shit, I didn't mean to do this. Oh well, I'll get to say hi to this person at least. I didn't meet your friends on the other side of Brinstar, but that's okay. Actually, you may not have even known each other before I came along. There we go. Ideally, there would be a much more graceful curve between the knuckle-bustingly frustrating on one end, this is the minimum amount of equipment you can have to enter this fight, and the much more accessible difficulty on the other end. I can, at least with Ridley, say that that was not a linear curve. Or, not a linear curve, that's the wrong word. It was not a graceful curve. It was not a smooth gradient. It was not a gently sloping parabola. It was all but binary. It was, here's knuckle-bustingly frustrating on the one end, and here's almost piss ease on the other. And the binary key that gets you between the two is the plasma beam. A plasma beam in this game is ridiculously powerful. It is overly powerful. I was a little bit afraid in Fusion that as soon as I got the plasma beam, I was going to start feeling OP, and the difficulty balancing that had appeared in the game up to that point would disappear. But the designers of that game just immediately leveled up the enemies such that the plasma beam didn't feel OP. And indeed, every single upgrade that you get throughout the entirety of Fusion feels more and more like... what's a good way to put it? It feels just like you are barely adequate. At the best of times, you feel barely adequate. You are just powerful enough to beat your enemies, when combined with a great deal of skill. But if you don't have that skill, then all the power that you've amassed up to that point will not help you. Even against the game's final boss, it took me like 3 or 4 attempts to make any headway. The Sax, which I think is the real final boss, which is actually fitting. I wanted the Sax to be the real final boss, so that's okay. But, yeah, I think I've made my point. The encounters in this game, Super Metroid, you can see the balancing of history at work here. You can see the balancing of stuff being oriented more towards flash factor, more towards impression upon the senses, without giving a whole lot of thought to the actual mathematics underneath that directly dictate the interactivity of the game. Just look at Kraid. Man, when I was a kid and I saw that supersized Kraid for the first time, I was like, oh my god! My bowels turned inside out. It was so impressive. The fact that the fact that Dragon could grab you and smack the shit out of you, so impressive. But you ever notice, the further you go back in time, the easier it is to impress people with media. Like, if you go back to look at a sci-fi movie from, say, the 70s to 80s, they look like complete shit compared to today, and they're really slowly, languidly paced. It's like a massive difference compared to just the artistic styles that exist in the intellectual capital of Hollywood today. Or whatever other, movie-making organization you're talking about today. And that bothers me. The fact that people are easier to impress the further you go back in time. Does that imply that the consumers of media are an inherently uncreative bunch? That we can't imagine how it could be done better when we see a movie set where the backdrop is held together with pipe cleaners and twine? That bugs me. I don't like the idea of content consumers being an intrinsically uncreative bunch. I feel like we should be better than that, even if we don't have the resources or the training necessary to actually create new media. Anyway, I think I've said all I can say about that. I guess I may just leave it by saying that Ridley was every bit as guilty of just having a fight that was basically centered entirely around the flash factor. But the interactivity was skewed far more towards the end of knuckle-bustingly frustrating and not boring or just useless showmanship like in Kraid's case. Please pause and reflect upon what we just witnessed. Here's one thing that older games tended to do much better than modern games do. Not a word spoken. So much was communicated there. So much was imposed upon the player's senses without a word. So much. This is shit that game designers like Kojima and BioWare and Square Enix will never, ever, 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 ever understand. That there is power in not trying too hard. That there is power in putting down the pen. And it's a deeply frustrating thing to me to think that art, the art of saying more by saying less, is something that we had only as a means of conceding to inferior computer hardware back in the day. But now that we have hardware that's capable of words, that's all we know how to do. I shouldn't say that as if it were a universal truth. Obviously it's not. But people slather unreal praise upon... I'm going back because I think I'm going to need every single missile I have, so I'm going to refill at the station over here first. People slather unreal praise on entities like Kojima and Square Enix and BioWare. And it bugs me. It bugs me that can we not step back and think, how much more impactful would this scene have been? In fact, let's think about it from the opposite direction. Let's think what just happened to Samus just now. How much would it have robbed the power of the moment to have Samus go into like a monologue, just like we saw in Fusion over and over again, if there had been a game flow breaking pause where text appeared over the screen? Oh my god, that's quite obviously the Metroid larva that I rescued from SR388, and it was about to suck all the energy and life out of me, but it realized that I was its surrogate parrot that it had imprinted on, and herpaderpadoo. And we know this! We know this, we were there. Fuck you, we don't need the words. We know this, we were there, we saw it, we witnessed it. This was firsthand, we were there. I really shouldn't be wasting missiles because I have a finite amount of them, and I may not even have enough. I'm here to experiment to find if I have enough, and if I don't, then I'm going to end up needing to count. But we'll see. I may also have, like, a deficit of energy that I need. Well, hello, Mother Brain. If indeed you can be called that, which I don't know if you could. Oh, that was far quicker than I thought. Okay, let's hope these super missiles are sufficient. Oh, it is. Damn, so I did come in here with enough missiles. If I had 10 fewer missiles or 2 fewer super missiles, I probably wouldn't have had enough. But now I can likely manage the rest of this encounter just with charged plasma beam. Somebody pointed out that if I did the math right, a charged plasma beam is basically worth 3 super missiles. Are you fucking insane? Holy shit, this is an overpowered weapon. The plasma beam in this game reminds me of, like, well, I only played it briefly. And by briefly, I mean when I was a teenager. But, Final Fantasy VI on the Super NES, which was poorly localized as Final Fantasy III for a while. As soon as you get Ultima in that game, the magic spell Ultima, the game's basically over. There's essentially no challenge left anymore, because everything is really, really, really easy to kill with a attack that's high damage, non-elemental, so it can't be resisted or absorbed, and does damage to every enemy on the screen. It's insane, and the plasma beam here is reminding me just of that. Holy shitfire. I don't have as much health as I usually do when I come into this fight, so I'm going to need to be careful. That's been the one really beneficial thing of this run so far. You know what, I don't know if I have enough health to survive a single hyper beam, so I'm just going to dump my tanks preemptively. Let's see, manual, there we go. Actually, would this even matter? Would it not dump my tanks automatically? I don't know. But look, I didn't have any missiles. I just got into this encounter with the plasma beam and nothing else. I hope I can't stand up. Good, I can't stand up, okay. Okay, so normally, when you come into this fight for the first time, you would not know that the game is effectively over at this point, but, yeah, this is more... Yeah, this too is more flash than substance, but at least there's a powerful narrative statement to be made here, again, without the words. You get to see it. You get to live it. This is something that's happening to you, the person who matters, the person who's spending their money and time on this work of art, the person sitting in the chair with the controller in her hands. This happens to you. The emotional impact is to you, not to some shitface on the screen who begs with a fire for it not to go out in some ruins. Thank you, Titus. The power of this was such that even though logically we knew that Metroids are horrifying monsters who would readily suck the energy out of you if they hadn't imprinted upon you as a parent, we knew that logically. But the power of that scene was such that we felt really, really bad for the Metroid larva. We felt so bad. We felt like it was a pet. A pet that this nasty walker version of Mother Brain had killed. And we were pissed. You dare kill my baby Metroid! Fuck you, Space Pirate Leader! God damn it, I hate you and everything you stand for. I would have adopted that Metroid. We would have gotten a home in the suburbs and had pool parties where my pet sucked the life out of all the people around us. Oh, it would have been so wonderful. Fuck you, Mother Brain, fuck you. Wow. This final sequence is being, like, way easier and quicker than I thought it would be. Apparently, like, the slow upgrade process that I took while trying to fight Ridley has now, like, made it sufficiently easy to just plow through this section of the game without even thinking about it. And I messed up my Shine Spark. There we go. Here's a question. The space pirates who we see occupying this escape segment in Turian, are they the same object? Like, are they the same in-game entity? Oh, come on. Don't go losing your somersault now, stupid booty. Are they the same entity as the super pirates who I encountered down in Lower Norfair, or are they just a special entity? I'm tempted to say that they're a special entity who you only witness here, because they're not doing the same thing where they like go into martial arts stance and try to kick you or change yellow. I think they are just a special entity meant only for the Turian escape sequence. Although the story logic behind them would probably be that they are the same super pirates. Oh, well, those two were acting the same. At least I think they were. Okay, now don't worry. Even though I didn't meet the wall jumper dudes and I only met the shine sparking mother, I'm gonna save them. I never play this game without saving them. As soon as I learned that you could save them the first time, I always save them because I'm not a heartless dick knob. Just like Optimus Prime said, all sentient creatures deserve the right to exist in this universe. I don't think he said that. What was it? Free will? Something? He had a quote about free will was the sentient right of all sentient beings. I don't know. I never cared about Transformers. Whatever. They're sentient. According to Fusion, they're intelligent. And they were not hostile. And in fact, they were even helpful. So I feel obligated to save them. Alright. Run, my friends. There's not much time. You know, I've never played this game while cheating to receive the Hyper Beam right from the beginning. And it makes me wonder how this game would act if you used the Hyper Beam on the bosses, like the big 4 bosses. Never done that before. Okay, gunship, take me away, just like Calgon. For Wumph, liftoff in 3, 2... You know, even though I spent most of my time underground in catacombs, the amount of ground that I covered in Zebs would have been minuscule compared to the overall size of the planet. So there's a lot of that planet that I probably didn't see. Did she make it? Oh, of course she did. Hey, don't hit the camera! Ah! My time is going to be hideous because of all the backtracking. No. God. Oh, that's right, I don't get to see Swimsuit Samus. If I'd been 2 minutes faster, I would have gotten to see Swimsuit Samus. Oh, damn. I feel so awful about everything I have ever accomplished. Ugh. Wow. I must admit that I have run into the exact same problem that I ran into with Link to the Past. It at least didn't go into the same exact problem of being allowed to fight a boss that, regardless of skill and stamina, you could not beat. At least that didn't happen. And if I had dumped as much time into fighting Ridley as I had Bahamut, I probably would have beaten it without the Plasma Beam. Though I did intend to lose my somersault at some points during Ridley's fight, probably the single biggest thing that kept me from going on is the increasing frazzle factor. Like with Bahamut, with La Mulana years ago, I stopped, walked away, rested, thought about it, got some food, physically recovered, and then came back at it. I didn't do that with Ridley. I just kept hammering and hammering and hammering. But still, 20-plus attempts is, I think, a pretty good indication that the fight is not really balanced for anything other than the Plasma Beam or a fuck ton of super missiles. Pretty obvious, pretty obvious. Not much else to say, is there? This is yet another game that is extremely pretty, and at least on the surface of things has aged very well. But when you get into the nitty-gritty, when you get to the nuts and bolts, there are deficiencies. There are deficiencies that the smart people who made Metroid Fusion tried to address. And who knows, maybe their choice to do the linear thing wasn't solely for story reasons. Maybe their choice to do the linear thing was so they could have tighter control over the gameplay and offer a more impactful, engaging experience where you're either not, you're not stuck between the binary of pissingly easy or knuckle-bustingly frustrating. Because I imagine developing a smooth gradient between those two extremes would have to be really hard. I don't know how you'd do it. You'd need some really clever creative solutions to make it difficult but doable on the one extreme, and doable but still slightly challenging on the other extreme. Yeah, I'm not going to get the full thing. It'll just be your head. Or just her face, apparently. Well, she smiled at least. That's worth something. If I'd been 2 minutes faster, I would have gotten to see. Okay, now I want this item completion percentage to be as low as possible, but it's not going to be very low, because I was forced to gather a whole bunch of crap for Ridley. Oh, damn. That's actually the lowest I've ever managed. 37%? Alright, so let's talk. First off, I've never actually tried to press buttons on the screen. I don't think it does anything. Yeah, I'm slamming the buttons, nothing's happening. Okay. So, I know I said that I wouldn't do any more Zelda games, and believe me, I didn't want to. But, more than not wanting to play a Zelda game again, I do want to fulfill an obligation to a friend. And somebody pulled my name out of a hat in a Secret Santa drawing, and this person said, okay, UD, the thing you're going to do for me, I want at least 2 hours of usable footage of you playing Minish Cap. Minish Cap. So this I will do. Same MO as Fusion, not complaining about this mere presence of the mere words being there. And if I find it not completely destructive to my very soul, then maybe I'll finish the whole thing. But a minimum of 2 hours of usable footage of Minish Cap. That'll be the next project. Once again, Happy New Year to everybody. Thank you for watching me as you always do. This has been Usually Dead, retrospectively LPing Super Metroid, and yeah.